Hi, I'm Tracy Castles, PhD, the founder of Evolutionary Parenting. Today I want to talk to you about toddler sleep, specifically 3 of the most common beliefs people have about toddler sleep that don't necessarily match reality. In our culture in particular, toddlerhood is a time where even the gentlest of parents can suddenly find themselves overwhelmed and struggling. Not only is toddlerhood a hard time as our babies move towards more mobility and curiosity about the world around them, meaning they're getting into everything, but our society has a different set of expectations for toddlers. Although we may be obliging to our young infants, once they're more mobile, it can seem like they should suddenly be ready to get a job and start paying taxes. And nowhere are these expectations more pronounced than with sleep. There are 3 main areas that are the target of cultural expectations of toddler sleep that we must address: the amount they sleep, how they sleep, and where they sleep. Let's start with the amount they sleep. When I work with families, or I'm speaking to families in my Back to Basics sleep course, I get many who fear that their children aren't reaching that magical number laid out by a variety of professional bodies. Interestingly, this number varies country to country, making assessments even harder. But if we look at the numbers given by the Sleep Foundation in the United States, they suggest that toddlers need 11 to 14 hours of sleep a day total. So yes, this does include naps. Now, some toddlers are closer to 10 hours in a day, and this can cause a lot of panic. Now, oddly, I don't see parents worry about toddlers who sleep too much. So how do these recommendations line up with the reality for a lot of toddlers? Recent research looking at toddlers' sleep from 2.5 to 3.5 years of age used actigraphy to measure their sleep overnight, so we're not including naps. With a sample of 420 toddlers to start, and ending with 276 of them still providing data at 3.5 years, the average time in bed for these kids, it seems most slept alone, was 10.4 hours, which is what parents would most likely report. And if you couple this with a daytime nap, you would probably fall in that 11 to 14 hour range for the day. However, the amount of time in bed and the amount of time asleep are 2 different things, as these researchers discovered. The actual time asleep was between 8 and 8.5 hours on average, depending on the age. For kids to hit that 11 to 14 hour mark, that would mean they would need to be napping a minimum of 2.5 to 3 hours a day, depending on their age. Now, some toddlers may be doing that, but not a lot. Let's also recognize that the 8-ish hours is the average, which means many toddlers fell below this and many above. So even 8 isn't some magic number to hit. And here's the thing. Most families that worry co-sleep. This means parents are in the room with their child and are thus far more likely to be aware of these wakings than parents who are asleep themselves in a different room. In fact, there is other research that does find that bed sharing or co-sleeping families are more accurate in reporting their child's sleep than other families. So, should you worry if your child isn't sleeping 13 hours a day? No. As I always tell families, look at your child for signs of chronic sleep deprivation. Are they cranky all day? Is their appetite dropping? Are they sleeping more and more during the day to make up for night sleep? These are the things you would want to be alert for, and know that it still isn't a cause for huge concern, as you can always work towards healthier sleep habits for your children that still include co-sleeping and breastfeeding and all that good stuff. You can find out more in my Back to Basics sleep course on evolutionary parenting. The second area of concern is how they sleep. By this I mean that there is a sudden expectation that toddlers will sleep through the night. Even some of the most gentle parents tolerate all the wakings in infancy because they believe that as they enter toddlerhood, this will magically disappear. Now let me dissuade you of this notion. It doesn't. In fact, I often tell families that in the 12 through 15 month stage, it can be one of the worst. But even as our kids get older, waking at night is a common phenomenon. That same research that informed on how long toddlers slept overnight also provided us with some information on their waking patterns too. Now remember, these are older toddlers who are in the 2.5 to 3.5 years of age range, so actually even getting into the preschool years. At 2.5 years of age, the average number of wakings that were longer than 5 minutes, for yes, they didn't even count those that were less, was 4.72. In fact, it drops to just a hair over 4 by 3.5 years of age. Now, It doesn't mean that they're waking their parents for all of these. So many parents report way fewer wakings. But again, if you were sleeping close to your toddler and they woke for a minimum of 5 minutes, chances are you'd hear the babbling or moving around that comes with this awake period. So why doesn't it change? Well, let's think about all the things that go on in toddlerhood. Starting at 12 months, our children face the following. 1. Continued teething. For some reason, people seem to discount teething a lot, but it's a huge problem, especially for the later teeth that come during toddlerhood. You have eye teeth, first-year molars, and perhaps the worst of all, second-year molars. These are the stages that can cause intense discomfort, which results in a lot of wakings, even if it doesn't seem to bother them as much during the day. Now, this is likely because most things don't bother us as much when we're distracted and doing things like we do when we're awake. But as soon as we try to rest, they come creeping up and cause those sleep problems. 2. Growth spurts. There are several growth spurts in the first 3 years of life and beyond, and they're not comfortable. If you were someone who experienced a growth spurt in adolescence, you may have pity on our younger children. But if not, like me, I can tell you my own brother did, and was clear it was some of the worst pain he's endured. Our kids get to experience this regularly. And again, like teething, it gets worse at night when we don't have other things to distract us. 3. Gross motor development. Learning to walk totally interferes with sleep, and kids will often practice these skills in their sleep. Even as they learn other skills like jumping and running, this can cause a temporary disruption at nighttime. This is likely due to experiencing the world in a new way, and also the muscle pain that can come with working these new muscles. 4. Language acquisition. Yep, toddlerhood is an explosion of new words that come at all times. Our toddlers are not only understanding more and more of what we say, but are learning how to express themselves verbally as well. This can lead to fun things like practicing speech in their sleep, making us grown-ups think they're awake when they aren't. 5. Social development. To add to all the rest of this, toddlerhood sees a shift in how our kids perceive others. They start to learn that people are distinct and have preferences different from their own, and this leads to new ways of engaging with others. And of course, seeing people in a new way means understanding your whole world in a new way, which can sometimes make it hard to calm the brain enough to sleep. 6. Toileting. It's normal that as kids get older, their bodies start to wake them when they need to go pee. It's a stage we all hope our kids hit, and/or are wet. Depending on the child, they may be more sensitive to this before they're able to remain dry overnight, and this can cause frequent wakings, especially if parents aren't aware and aren't changing them overnight. Clearly, there are a lot of reasons for toddlers to still be waking at night, and so the expectation that they shouldn't just doesn't hold water. Finally, the last area of concern is where they sleep. Many parents accept the whole co-sleeping thing with babies, thinking that as toddlerhood comes, so does the move to their own bed or room. In fact, many parents fear that if this doesn't happen, it's going to impede their child's later independence, and so they can feel the need to force such a change. On the other hand, there are parents who may have never co-slept and suddenly find their toddlers looking to come into bed with them more and more. Not quite understanding what is going on, they will fight tooth and nail to get those kids back into their own bed, sometimes doing the walk back multiple times a night. So what is normal for a toddler? Well, for those in the latter camp who suddenly see an increase in attempts to co-sleep, please know this is very, very normal. Data out of Sweden actually found that co-sleeping increases between the ages of 1 and 5 before starting to go back down again. The hypothesis is that there's a lot going on at those ages, and as kids start to have nightmares and have to navigate a scary world, being close to their parent at night helps in calming those fears. But what of this fear of independence? Is it well-founded? Well, we can look at this historically, cross-culturally, and scientifically. So let's start historically with the consideration of hunter-gatherers who have comprised the majority of human history. In research on hunter-gatherer tribes, currently, toddlers continue to sleep with their parents, and it's not until middle childhood or even adolescence that children start to sleep away from their parents. In these cultures, children are also expected to be highly independent in ways that we would never expect of our own children. Girls as young as 6 are taking care of younger children on a regular basis. Boys as young as 10 may be gone for days or even a couple weeks, serving as guides for visitors. Would you expect that kind of independence from your child? If we move to a cross-cultural examination, we have lots of current non-hunter-gatherer societies which practice bed sharing well beyond infancy. Many Asian societies co-sleep regularly, with Japan being a noted example. I use co-sleeping here because in some cases it is more co-sleeping than bed sharing, as traditional beds are not always used. However, it would be difficult for us to argue that Japanese individuals struggle with independence throughout their lives or seem stunted by this arrangement. As mentioned earlier, in Sweden, the rates of bed sharing increase for children between the ages of 1 and 5 and then start to go back down again. But again, do we think Swedish children are a hot mess of dependence issues? Of course not. But as some would rightfully say, looking at other cultures may not inform well to our own. So this brings us to looking at this scientifically. There are 3 different studies that offer longer-term perspectives on bed sharing beyond infancy. The first study included low-income families and looked at bed sharing up to 3 years as it related to outcomes at 5 years of age. Although there were initial findings suggesting bed sharing was negatively related to various social and cognitive outcomes, these associations disappeared when controlling for other demographic variables, like low birth weight, or whether or not the child was in the Head Start program, meaning the original relationships were not due to bed sharing, but the fact that bed sharing also related to some of these other characteristics. There were no significant relationships between long-term bed sharing and other social skills at age 5. The second study is a bit more relevant in that it actually assessed the effects of bed sharing over the first 3 years as a function of the type of sleeping arrangement, whether it was early planned co-sleeping that extended beyond 12 months versus reactive co-sleeping versus solitary sleeping, which was being in one's own room by the age of 12 months and may have included early co-sleeping. And then further assessments of independent behaviors in preschool, including social independence and self-reliance. Contrary to their expectations, the early co-sleeping group was the most independent, more so than their solitary sleeping counterparts. Finally, we have an 18-year longitudinal study that included assessments of longer-term bed sharing. Bed sharing was measured at 6 months and then again at ages 3, 4, and 6 years. At both 6 years of age and 18 years of age, there were no differences between kids who bed shared up to 6 years of age the last time assessed, and those that didn't on a host of other factors, including self-esteem, relationships, emotional maturity, and more. As the authors themselves concluded about people's fears over longer-term bed sharing, quote, "We suggest that such fears are without warrant," unquote. It seems that no matter which way we look at it, bed sharing or co-sleeping in toddlerhood is not only normal, but should not be a worry for longer-term outcomes. All in all, when we think about toddler sleep, specifically the amount they sleep, how they sleep, and where they sleep, the most important thing to remember is that most of what you will be told just doesn't hold water. For more information on the reality of toddler sleep, you can check out my course, Back to Basics, available at Evolutionary Parenting.